So today on Mark My Words, I have a very special guest who I met not too long ago through LinkedIn, my favorite social media platform. And when I learned that Nhu Nguyen, and we talked about that enunciation of your last name, I hope I got that good. But Nhu here is somebody that I share a very special commonality and bond with. And we both were born with a cleft lip. Were you also born with the cleft palate too?
I was, yeah.
Okay, so that's two for two. So Nhu and I were born with a cleft lip and palate, and Nhu is the first person after 41 years that I've ever met who I'm going to have a conversation with that has a cleft lip and palate. And part, not certainly not all of the reason I'm doing this podcast, but some of the reason is to hopefully for people to see and hear me and be inspired by me. And I do not think, because of the path that I've led, not meaning anybody, I guess, quote unquote, like me, just didn't think that I would be having this kind of episode or conversation, but that's why I guess I'm doing this. So welcome to the show, Nhu. How you doing today?
Thanks for having me, Mark. I'm feeling great. And I think, considering our circumstances, it's really important to really put the awareness out there because, like you said yourself, you haven't really met anyone up until now. So I think this is really important to share, just in case there's anyone else out there that either has chocolate palate as well or feels like they're alone. They're not. So this is really exciting to have a conversation with you. So thanks for having me.
Oh, it's definitely my pleasure. And I will be the first to say that for many, many years, up until social media came along and people started creating pages around it, whether it be on Instagram or
Mhm.
Facebook, I have felt pretty alone with all this. I feel like even though I mentioned before we started that my brother also had the same obstacle, I mean, I have always more or less felt alone with this. So having social media and just the way the world has opened up more to
Yeah.
meeting people like me or you is going
Mhm.
a long way as far as my how I feel and in my own skin. And
Yeah.
there's a lot of really important issues that are out there today, and they definitely deserve the time and the media that they get. But I feel like this is one of those things that does deserve a little more of a spotlight because I think there's a lot more people facing challenges. I mean, we're talking about, you know, our face. It's like the first thing that people see.
Yeah.
And, there's so many people out there who, you know, are judgmental for the wrong
Yeah.
reasons and,
Yeah.
can't see past that. And
Mhm.
I feel like it's come a long way in my lifetime. I certainly think since I was a kid, it's gotten a lot better, but I feel
Yeah.
like emphasis on stuff like this, especially like something like cleft lip, cleft palate, it deserves a little more focus and time. And
Mhm.
I'm so excited to take the opportunity to talk to you about all this. And I do want to maybe I'll give you the opportunity rather than me rambling on the whole time. I know you have your own business, you're a creative strategist, multimedia designer.
Mhm.
Uh, why don't you share a little bit about what you do and why you do it?
Sure. So I am, like you said, a creative strategist. So it really stems from that place of wanting to lift people's voices up and share people's stories because, I'm sure you share the same feeling. When I was younger, it was really hard for me to have that voice. Um, I was younger. I actually had a really large underbite. I had some work done, but I had really bad dental work. My bilateral cleft lip palate was really more prominent, and I was hard of hearing, and I was a first generation immigrant. So growing up with all of that, it was really hard for me to figure out what my identity was, um, and who I wanted to be and where I really stood in the world and what my place was. So I really turned to creativity and arts to really help myself express what I was feeling. And through that, I found my identity. So it was sort of in a way like a big, I'll show you to the world, for looking down on me. I wanted to really do anything and everything I could creatively. So I started drawing, I started painting, I started doing theater and singing. I really wanted to do anything that could help me express who I was. So fast forward to today, I do a lot of that. So I really have that same ambition to really learn as much as I can creatively, just to be able to tell someone's story as robustly as possible. So I went to school for graphic design, but I also taught myself photography. So I actually have a photography business that started in 2009. And I ironically started in the fashion industry, just because I really wanted to encapsulate what beauty meant to me, um, and really help other people feel beautiful as well. And then that kind of transitioned into the advertising marketing world. So now what I do is I do some art directing and I do some creative strategy for clients to help really understand what the message of their brand is. I think my thinking now with marketing, it's not about the product anymore. And it used to be, here's what this thing does, A, B, and C. But now it's really about the audience and what they want to feel. And for me, that's really powerful. Just using empathy as a big tool in everything I do creatively, it means a lot. So a lot of what I do is really inspired by my experiences growing up.
Wow, that was a loaded and fantastic answer. That there's so many things I want to touch on there.
Sure.
The first thing that really got me was the fist pump and I'll show you
Yeah.
mentality.
Mm-hmm.
I can so relate to that. It's ridiculous
Yeah.
because growing up, I mean, I had a lot of people not, I mean, there were definitely people getting in my face saying, well, you're not valid, you can't do it. But
Yeah.
there were plenty of people passively aggressively, passive aggressively, just, you know, not having faith in me, not believing in me. And that, I think when you are somebody like me and yourself, I don't think people realize how smart and perceptive you become to those
Mm-hmm.
things. And I think a
Yeah.
lot of people think that they're doing a lot of that without the other person, being me, not knowing. But I always sensed it and I always kind of knew. And that mentality is like the exact mentality I had for many years. And it
Mm-hmm.
actually, much like you, was a big reason that I, you know, motivated myself and was so driven to get the kind of work that I've had. I mean, I've worked for some of the biggest broadcast media companies in like the world, which that was
Awesome.
my way of being like, I'm going to show you, I'm going to get like the greatest job. You're never going to believe that I had this job.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And now you're going to respect me.
Yeah.
And,
Yeah.
I think you and I kind of like took slightly different paths on that, but both
Mm-hmm.
definitely seem to have the same mentality. And I know for me, one of my creative outlets was always writing, which
Mm-hmm.
I kind of pushed to the wayside up until the past few years. But I can definitely understand the need to find that outlet to show people that, hey, there's we have a lot more in common than you think. There's a lot
Yeah,
more going on internally, and that it's interesting that we both found creative outlets to express that.
yeah, and I think to your point, right? When you're people like us, you become so much more hyper aware of everything because I don't know about you, but I was very quiet growing up, and people just they tend to be condescending, whether they mean it or not. They just see you and they kind of look down on you, and you take those things in like a sponge. So growing up, every single thing that you experience and feel, you recognize all those nuances, right? The way someone might say hi would mean like it to us it varies because someone can say hi in a certain way, but we know there's a deeper underlying thing to it, and maybe it's paranoia, I don't know. But I think to us we really pick up on those things, and it really just enriches our experiences more to just put that back out creatively. So
Well, I think by nature, I'm a much more extroverted person than I
mm-hmm,
think I ever really gave myself credit for. And I think early in life, it really depended. I had some real good groups of friends. I
mm-hmm,
had some classmates that really weren't that good. And I think there's always been this like desire to be a little more extroverted and
mm-hmm,
outgoing and could do ultimately what I'm doing now. But I feel like by the time I got to high school, that part of me might have been like kind of beaten down a little bit. And
yeah,
I became a little more like withdrawn and internal. And that's really been a big part of like my adult life is to be a little more internal.
yeah,
But I don't think that's actually who I am.
mm-hmm,
I think I want to be a little more extroverted and outgoing, and it's a interesting like personality like mix and conflict. And I found that when I started getting on LinkedIn and I started meeting people and they were encouraging me to make video content and just seeing myself on camera and hearing and just saying, oh, I don't sound that bad. I don't look that bad. Like maybe I can do this. And it's
yeah,
been like a lifelong of building myself up in a lot of these ways.
mm-hmm.
So for me, it's interesting. So, first of all, have you always kind of dreamt of working for yourself and being an entrepreneur, or what was your goal to be a graphic designer and creative for like a brand?
I When I was younger, I don't think I ever really imagined what my adult life would be. And to be quite honest, just to kind of touch on the mental health side of things, I didn't even know if I was going to make it. Um, Not to make it dark, but um,
No, please.
yeah. So, but I knew I always wanted to be creative. So I think my desires really fluctuated a lot. Like at first, so actually, when I was really young, I was super extroverted, and this is before I went to school and all that stuff. But it wasn't until I hit or I was put into society that I realized that I didn't quite fit in, and that's really when I became more withdrawn. But I've always loved to sing, so for a really long time I wanted to be a singer. Um, but back then, with Hollywood and societal norms, people weren't as open-minded about how different people are. So, given my hearing issues and just not being able to communicate as effectively as I would like with other people, that dream fizzled out really quickly. Um, and then also, I had a speech impediment. I still kind of do, but back then, I really had to take some speech therapy because I just wasn't enunciating my words as well as I would have liked. So that really squandered a lot of creative dreams that I wanted to have, so like being an actress or whatever it was. Um, but I knew I had a lot of this energy, this vibrancy that I wanted to put out there. I knew I didn't want to be a doctor. I knew I didn't want to be a lawyer. Um, the stereotypical Asian parents, that's what they want you to be. But I was like, I knew for a fact that I didn't want to do it, much to their dismay. um, uh, but I ended up going to college and realizing, graphic design is really cool, and I just kind of fell into it. Um, not really fell in. I worked hard for it, but I fell into the marketing world. I worked in an agency for a while. But the entrepreneur side of me, it's not like go getter, I'll show you kind of mentality again. I always wanted to do the next best thing. So um, with the photography side, people started telling me, you need to start charging people. And so I did. But then I more or less was like, I can do more than this. So um, I started doing logo work. I started doing branding work. And then I started doing strategy work. And then I kind of sort of became this serial entrepreneur, which is kind of detrimental to myself because I'm always working all the time. But with quarantine and COVID, I realized really what my passion is again, which is to help people and lift their voices. So I kind of went back to my roots again, which is the drawing, the illustration, and I started a new venture in the advocacy spectrum, just raising awareness to certain causes that were important to me and just helping other organizations that needed it.
Wow, you have like the best answers because there's like a million things that I want to go back to. Um, so one thing that I can tell you that we have in common, I also kind of had that bug that I wanted to like act or put myself out there and be a
Mm-hmm.
speaker. And really a lot of this wanting to be a speaker was to just talk about my journey. I feel like I've had such a unique path in life, and a lot of that has to do with the fact that I haven't really met anybody like me. So I
Mm-hmm.
feel like a lot of the things I've gone through internally and just day to day have been pretty unique. And I know I took an acting class when I was in
Okay.
college, and that actually did a lot of good to show me that, okay, I can put myself out there a little bit and people aren't like rejecting me and, you know,
Mm-hmm.
looking down at me because I had the same mind block where it was like, well, nobody's gonna hire me to be an actor or be on
Mm-hmm.
camera or anything like that. So I'm gonna be a writer and I'm gonna work in broadcasting, but I'll be behind the scenes. I won't be
Mm-hmm.
in front of the camera. And looking back, I mean, I don't know if you have this same thought or not. I know for me personally, I look back and I'm like, oh man, I should have just pursued what was in
Yeah.
my heart and in my soul. Because I think I would have been even happier doing all that. And,
Mm-hmm.
just, I can remember thinking about the future and thinking about where I would be and how people would look at me and how inspired they would be.
Mm-hmm.
And if only I could just get through the like 10 million obstacles I had and mind
Yeah.
blocks in my head, that I could get there. And I feel like it's taken me a long time, but I feel like I finally have gotten to that point and it
Yeah.
feels really good. Like I definitely still have that mentality you have of, I'm gonna show them and I'm gonna get them, and I'm still very driven. But
Mm-hmm.
I guess the one thing about that, gonna show them mentality, and I don't know, it still helps to drive me. Like the one thing I had to learn is if there were any people from my past who I felt were particularly like a thorn in my side, I was like, well, I'm definitely going to show them, and they're going to come back and they're going to say, I'm sorry, and, you
Yeah.
know, you're great, and whatever. And I've come to find that it doesn't really turn out that way. And
Yeah.
it's a great mindset to have because it motivates you and inspires
Mm-hmm.
you. And it makes you see that you can do a lot more than you thought you could do. But
Yeah.
that was like a hard reality because when Facebook came around, I was like, oh man, all these people I know are like on Facebook. They're gonna see what I'm doing. They're gonna all just like apologize. And I had this like notion that that was gonna happen, and yeah, it didn't. So I don't know if that is something that you ever like went through or struggled with, but I know I did. And for some reason, did I lose you? Are you still there? I think I might have lost Nhu, who her screen is frozen, and now she's back.
And back.
So I think I was,
Don't know what happened.
you know, well that's okay because there was very little silence. I didn't even know, like you just had that look on your face. I'm like, oh, what did I say?
That's me.
And then I was like, oh, she just lost her connection. So I don't know how much of that whole uh, dialogue you heard, but I guess what I really want to round this out and ask is, did you ever have this mentality of like, I mean, we know you have the mentality of fist pumping and I'm going to show you, but
Mm-hmm.
what did you ever like feel like, okay, people, whoever teased me or looked down on me or was, you know, just passive aggressive and not, you know, giving me enough credit, did you ever have any moments where you were like, I hope so and so comes back and says they're sorry or whatever? Have you had those moments?
I guess in the moment when they happen, when they tease me or bully me, um, I I don't always I I don't want to be spiteful, so I don't actively say like, oh you're gonna get it. Um, but it was always more of like, I'm gonna show you that I'm more than what you think I am. I never wanted to have revenge necessarily, just I wanted people to learn more about themselves as people, and really develop themselves emotionally and maturely. And I've had those kind of redemption moments, which are, I would say, are nice to have. I've had people, when I was a child, they push me into trash cans or like they would laugh at me or whatever. Um, I've had them on Facebook message me and say like, "Hey, I'm getting married or I'm getting engaged. I love your work." And I'm like, hmm, charging a
Ah,
premium right now.
yeah.
um, so there have been moments of that, but it gets to the point where I'm like, like to feel satisfied by that is sort of an empty feeling now. Like what am I really getting out of it? It's not for me to get back at them. We're different people now. I'm sure they've grown and learned and realized who they were as people, and they were just kids. So I think now it's more, it's about education really, and that's why I speak and mentor other people. I'm sure anybody, even myself, have had moments in life where they might have been judgmental or thought about certain ways or certain things in certain ways, but um, the way I like to promote is just taking that kind of mentality and shifting it into something productive. So, for me growing up, I battled with depression and anxiety. I still do. And so that's a really big hump to get over, especially when you're a creative or designer. You have a lot of the self doubt that you're dealing with, tons of competition, especially with COVID. I do a lot of speaking with, especially new graduates, and mentorship with them, just to help them really realize and embrace who they are as people and designers and establish that brand for yourself. You shouldn't be designing and creating things just to be compared to other people. You should create for yourself. So that's something that I've learned. Your style is your style and you should embrace it. If people don't hire you, that's because they're not a good fit for you, not because they don't like you. So um, these are the kind of things that I try to promote now. Um, just in terms of it's not about what other people think anymore. It's about yourself, and you should be happy about that. Yeah.
I totally agree. I mean, like I said through that whole dialogue when you had that technical issue, I mean, I think I had to learn and realize that all these things I was hung up on from when I was growing up, I had to get over it.
Yep.
And I had to just realize that, look, this is my life, it's my path, it's my journey. Yeah, all that stuff and those people were a part of that journey. But
Mm-hmm.
I mean, at this point, I'm a completely different person. I'm sure whoever they are different now.
Mm-hmm.
And I think I just had to realize that not only can you not expect that kind of a thing, just because I was born with particular obstacles and might have been looked down on, I can't expect that people are just all going to come around and get
Mm-hmm.
on their hands and knees and
Yeah.
apologize. And it's not really like the way I want to live my life anyway. And I guess
Mm-hmm.
that's just the kind of thing you learn as you get older and you evolve. And I feel like at this point, it's almost like, yeah, it's hard to look back on some stuff, but you really have to just keep moving forward. And
Yeah.
I think more than anything, it's taught me to learn to not dwell on the past and to keep
Mm-hmm.
pushing forward and to want more for my future and not let all that hold me back and, sit on the couch and dwell on
Mm-hmm.
something from 20, 30 years ago when I could be doing something for myself today.
Right.
So I feel like everything you said, like everything you're saying in this episode is just so relatable. I feel
Yeah.
like it's such a parallel in lessons learned and the path that we've led. So, with that being said, um, what can we talk about now? So we talked about your design and everything you're doing with that. I talked about your path a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so we can always go back to more personal stuff. I know we talked beforehand that there's some advocacy stuff that you wanted to talk about, and you mentioned that in your last little exchange there. And
Mm-hmm.
just because I keep looking around, like, I don't know if that's it or not. So you can educate me on what you're advocating for.
Sure. So with quarantine and COVID and a lot of the recent events in the world lately, there's so much disunrest in the world. Um, and something that I really started to embrace with myself is that I can be memorable and it's okay to be different and to embrace that. And what I mean by that is when I talk to someone, whether I'm networking or I'm just meeting them for the first time, my face is not, like they'll see something unique about me, right? Either it's my hearing aid or my bilateral cleft, or my speech impediment. There's something off. like I'm not normal. It's fine. But I embrace that. So how can I take that first impression of being different and for them to not forget me and use that to my advantage? So I really started to build my network as of late and really expand and meet new people. You know, that's why I really came on to Lincoln Local Baltimore and met people like yourself and Melody and all these amazing people. And realizing that the impact that I make can be really sustainable. So I'm really passionate about a lot of things, just in terms of, you know, equal rights for certain groups and making sure that these people that are being oppressed have the chance to have the same kind of rights and same kind of privileges as other people. So I find a lot of myself in that kind of group because being a person of color, that was another obstacle added on to me as well growing up. You know, going to schools with a predominantly white people, it's hard to really be given the same kind of chances as others. And you're talking about, you know, looking back and saying, you know, I really should have gone all the way with the actor thing. And I do the same thing with the singing thing. I love singing still. But I just felt like, oh, like this part, like the choir director, the theater director, you know, he favors, you know, these white students because they just fit the role better. And it just seemed like for me that representation wasn't there, so there just wasn't a space for me. So representation in all kinds of forms, whether it's about cleft lip palate or just about you know, certain kinds of rights not having them, that really matters to me. So like I said previously, I really came back to my roots of illustration and really embraced the mentality of it's all about the messaging. It's not about how perfect the art is. And that's actually something that's kind of an issue in the graphic design art world. A lot of people struggle with, you know, how can I make myself stand out, but also how can I make people like my work? And for me, I realized it's not about making people like your work, it's about making people relate to your work. So that's something I've really started to take a hold of, and I've really produced a lot of work that really means a lot to me. And so, in light of recent protests and stuff like that, I've created a lot of work that a lot of organizations have picked up, which has been really great. Um, Recently, unfortunately, Ruth Bader Ginsburg passed away, so I made a piece dedicated to her, and it actually went viral this past weekend, which was really cool.
Wow, nice.
So a lot of people picked it up. So I've been doing a lot of that kind of work, and also doing kind of this fun stuff. Like, for example, I actually have a sticker that I made here. It's Yoda holding bubble tea. Um, and just cute little stickers that I put up on my Etsy shop. But the things that I have that are more cause focused, I I always donate a portion of those proceeds to certain organizations because I think it just it's important to me to use my skills and my just my voice for good. So
That's wonderful. I love hearing about all this stuff. And, you know, I know we talked beforehand about how political and how much we wanted to dive into
yeah.
this. Um, what I will say is that as somebody who, you know, even though I'm a white male, I mean, I have definitely had my fair share of challenges and obstacles and judgments and exclusions. And even though, you know, I am in that demographic, you know, I've had a pretty hard time. I've really had to fight for pretty much everything that I have going on in my life. So for me, and just looking at the relationships I've had, you know, I grew up in the city of Reading, Pennsylvania, probably one of the most multicultural places I've ever been. And I spent 27 years of my life living there. And not only did that give me an opportunity to meet all kinds of people from all different walks of life, it also gave me an opportunity to see all these different people from all these different groups, you know, accepting me and taking me in, where in my own demographic, I didn't always feel like I belonged or fit in. And
Mhm.
for me to not be supportive of all these movements going on, like especially this year, and
Mhm.
it's always been in my blood to be supportive of these movements, but especially now for me to not support that, having walked in the shoes that I've walked in and the experiences I've had, it would be absolutely like, what the hell am I thinking? Like, what am I
Yeah.
doing?
Right.
So it's like, all these movements that are going on right now, like they absolutely get my support. I totally think that we should strive to understand each other more. And I think it kind of goes back to what we talked about before we started, which is I don't feel like enough people know what people like us go through just with like having a cleft lip and palate.
Mhm.
And people need to understand that it is hard. It's people can be very judgmental, and depending on where you grow up or what school you might go to, it can be pretty brutal. And even in like my work career, I've kind of felt some of the effects of it. And
Yeah.
even if it's not actually happening, it's still affecting me mentally. And
Right.
I can only imagine how, people fighting for equal rights are feeling without even having a cleft lip and palate or that kind of
Mhm.
obstacle. I almost feel like there's some parallels there, and
Right.
it's
And it
I
goes back to that whole empathy thing, right?
yeah,
It's you and I have experienced all these hardships, but even then we recognize our own privilege in the fact that we are able to still have the life that we had, and we have the chance to overcome these obstacles. Whereas, certain groups of people may feel that they're just not given that chance at all, despite being completely normal. And it's just either the color of their skin or their sexual orientation, it's always something. So, yeah,
yeah. No, I mean, again, not to turn the second half of this into a political discussion, but I mean, I just wanted to say I think what you're doing is like terrific. I think there was a time where I tried to like create a Facebook page for, cleft related stuff, and it's something that I really want to go back to someday. And maybe if and when I ever get to where I want to be with the podcast or whatever creative project I, am involved with, hopefully that's something that I can come back to and, you know, be an active advocate for. So, um, speaking, I wrote a couple notes because you keep saying such good things that I want to go back to.
sure.
So first of all, the one thing that you and I have in common, like obviously we have a lot in common, but I also was born with a bilateral cleft lip. So I wanted to put that out there. I don't know if that's something you can even notice, but I wanted to make uh, that point that that's something as I hit my pop filler that we both have in common. And we also, like, I spent a lot of time in speech class, and
Mhm.
my speech therapist has probably the most anti cleft lip like name. Like, you don't want to pronounce his name. His name is Mr. Schlossler.
Oh,
So,
Lord.
yeah, yeah. And
Yeah.
he was amazing, and I saw him for years, and he was somebody who definitely helped me to become, as good of a speaker as I am now, which I think I do pretty good. But um, yeah, just again, that was like the thing. Now I don't know when you did your speech pathology, but I would do mine in like the middle of the day, in the middle of
Yeah, in school.
school, and
Yeah.
it's like, oh man, another thing that,
Would
like,
make you like stand out and be the weird kid.
yeah,
Yeah.
like that's weird. Why is he leaving? Why is
Yeah.
he doing that? So it was just like, oh, this. But
Yeah.
it was a really good thing because even to this day, I think about those lessons that I learned, and
Mhm.
if I'm not pronouncing a P or a B properly and actually doing it with my lips, which I can
Mhm.
actually be a little lazy about.
Mhm.
So I always think of him going bah and pa. And I'm sure you had the
But I'm not.
same.
Yeah, I'm really lazy with my S's and my T's. Um, and I think going back to the whole reporting yourself on camera thing, that's actually something that helped me growing up. So I used to like sing on YouTube and like post these videos, and I would like critique myself. So singing really helped me really hammer those enunciation struggles I had down. But another thing I would really recommend to anyone, even if they don't have cleft palate, is taking a public speaking class. Um, I really struggle with breath control, which singing does help with, but when you're talking, it's a whole different ball game. I don't know if you have the same issue, but I run out of breath sometimes out of my nose. Um,
Oh,
and
yeah.
so I'm like chatting, and then all of a sudden I'm like, huh, oh God, hold on. And I have to breathe so I forget. And it's just weird finding those moments and sentences to take those deep breaths. So for me, especially in singing, holding notes has always been a really hard thing for me. And also random, but I can't blow balloons without having to hold my nose. And
Yeah.
I
I
tend to feel
can't.
like when people just go one blow and done, and I'm like, okay, here we go. And I have to hold my nose, otherwise it gets onto my nose. So, and these little things, I think it's hard, but I, speech pathology has really helped me, and also public speaking class in college really helps you just appear more confident. People take you more seriously. You have those moments. You know when to take those breaks when you're talking, without having to feel the need to fill them with like us or and just when people say that, it they take me less seriously. So I recommend that to anyone that needs to help.
So, first of all, I definitely cannot blow a balloon. So you
Yeah,
got one up on
I'm
me.
so glad I'm not the only one.
Yeah, I cannot do that. And I do agree that speech class really helped because it just helps you to think about what you're saying and how you're saying it.
Mm-hmm.
And I think just doing this podcast, when I listen back, I'm like, okay, I need to talk louder or I need to enunciate better.
Yeah,
And otherwise, like, you might be able to understand me, but it just sounds a little flat.
right.
So, I have learned to take any internal or external feedback on my
Mm-hmm.
speech and try to keep it in mind, which is not always easy to do, but especially since people may not realize this, but you really have to put the effort into speaking
Yeah.
sometimes. Like, it's something that you feel like you're good enough at. So
Mm-hmm.
you're like, oh, I can just be cool and relaxed like other people and just it'll come natural. But
Yeah.
it's not necessarily that way. Like, you have to work at it.
Yeah.
And yeah, you're shaking your head. Yes.
Yeah. I'm like, yes, I feel all this.
Yeah.
And especially for me too, being a female. I don't know if you've ever, I don't know if you've ever had a struggle, but well, growing up, whenever I really made that effort to over enunciate, people would take it the wrong way. They would think that I'm being too aggressive or I'm being too like snippy. Um, and that's something I also had to overcome because, you know, when it comes to females, if you're being too demanding, you're called a bitch, or you're not. Whereas a man, when they're being demanding, they're called a great leader. So these are also things that I had to really work on. Thankfully now I don't let that bother me. Before I had issues projecting, and so when I did work on that, I would it felt like I was yelling, and people were like, "Okay, take it down a notch," and I'm like, "This is just me trying to be like audible." Um, but yeah, now I don't really care what people say. I will say things how I need to say them. But that was something I also had to overcome too. Just people don't recognize there are so many nuances in speech that if you do it a certain way, people take it the wrong way. So that's something else I had to learn too.
No, I totally agree with that. And I don't know if I ever had any moments where I really was enunciating and like rubbed anybody the wrong way. But
Yeah.
if I did, I'm sure I was kind of like, yeah, that's right. You
Mm-hmm.
know, take
Yeah.
me seriously, pound my chest. And I, I don't think that that really happened very much, but I can
Yeah.
understand, just the effort and the struggle that it is to, be heard and taken seriously. And
Yeah.
I mean, it's something to this day, even like I had this notion that I was going to be successful, I was going to do all these things, and then I'd be able to just put my feet up on the desk and be completely taken seriously and right off into the sunset. It doesn't work like that.
Yeah.
And again, that's something I had to learn and understand that life doesn't necessarily work that way. And in some ways, we're a lot more like people who don't have those obstacles than we think. Yet,
Yeah.
there are definitely those differences. And one thing that I actually want to talk about before we run out of time
Mhm.
is just the whole journey of repair. We're born with these obstacles, and they obviously need repair. I'd be interested if you feel like talking about it. Just be interested in how many surgeries you had to endure, and just like what all did you have to endure just through your own journey.
Oh, oh my gosh. It's so funny too when people are like, "Oh, I have to get surgery done tomorrow." It's just like, "Oh, well, I've had like eight, so it's not a big deal." Like, you know. But anyway, I've had a lot of work done. Um, you know, it's hard to recall all of them because some of them I was even too young to remember. But obviously, when I was maybe two, I had my lips done. I had a big gap here. For those that don't know what bilateral cleft lip is, it's when it's both sides going up through your nostrils. Um, and then, I know you know this, Mark, but then if it's not bilateral, it's just the one side where it's cleft on the one nostril. So Mark and I, we have bilateral, which is two here. You can see my scars. Um, so I had that done, but underneath my dental work was horrendous. I just because we don't have that bone structure up there, the teeth grow in kind of oddly. So after that, it was just a long journey of dental work. So I've had expanders maybe 2 or 3 times in my life. Um, I've had braces twice. Um, I've had a bone graft done for my hip. So they took the bone from my hip and put it up where my palate is, right behind my front teeth. just so my front teeth have somewhere to kind of latch onto. And then I had jaw work done, and then the dental work, because my teeth grew in so oddly growing up. It was so hard to clean. So I've had a lot of years where my teeth just weren't getting the right hygiene they needed to get. So I actually have, um, like, I've had some teeth taken out. I've had several root canals just because these were teeth that I just wasn't able to tend to growing up. And eventually I'd like to get some veneers just because my teeth up here are dead. Sad. But then after that, the birth act and all that, my most recent one was my jaw surgery. So I think I mentioned earlier, I had a really big underbite. So they broke my jaw, put it together in place. They needed to do all the dental work first in order to do that, just so the teeth would match up. And then with that, I also had my wisdom teeth taken out, but that's kind of irrelevant. Everyone has that done. So yeah, that's it from there. And then in terms of my hearing aids, I just wear hearing aids whenever I'm awake. So yeah.
Wow. So I had a bone graft, but it was not from my hip. It was actually from my skull. And
Oh wow.
I still have the indentation to
Oh
this
wow.
day. I had that surgery in 1989. And
Okay.
yeah, so obviously it's healed up, but I
Mm-hmm.
can still feel where they did it. And it was for much the same reason as you, to bring in those eye teeth and, to give myself some teeth, which
Mm-hmm.
at this point, I'm just wearing a bridge because
Mm-hmm.
it just got to a point where I think I was in my mid-teens and I'm like, look, I think I look good. I'm tired of all these surgeries and all this work. Like, I just wanted it to be done. So, um, yeah, I guess for me, I don't really have a good idea of how many surgeries I might have had
Mm-hmm.
prior to 1989, which I was 10 at that point. But
Mm-hmm.
I did, from that point, I had obviously the bone graft and that all done, and had a rhinoplasty where they actually broke my nose,
Mm.
and that was fun.
I'm sure.
And I had that done, I think I was 1990, if I'm not mistaken. And then, so I had both of those in Philadelphia. So I
Okay.
had to, for years, once a month, driving down to Philadelphia for
Mm.
orthodontic
Uh,
work, and had a couple surgeries at Children's Hospital of Philadelphia.
okay. I'm in
And,
mind of Children's Hospital, these 2 years from the spring.
oh, nice.
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah, so after Philadelphia, we transitioned to a surgeon who was in the Reading area, and I
Mm-hmm.
had, I think, two more that I can think of. And one of those was a chin thing, so I had some chin work done, and I think after 1995, I think that was it. But as you learned before we went on, I mean, I was born with a syndrome called Opus GBBB, and with the cleft lip and palate, I also had some other stuff that came with it, and
Mm-hmm.
had some surgeries for those things as well. So I've had plenty of surgery, but
Yeah.
one thing I will say about you is that you're a little more courageous than me. I still get a little nervous at the idea of
Mm.
having surgery. So,
Well, I'm just like, hey, put me under. I don't want to remember any of it.
well, yeah, I definitely don't want to remember it.
Yeah.
Just a year or two ago, I had a whole new set of bridge work done,
Mm-hmm.
and there was a tooth that was going like just decaying. It was going bad, and
Mm-hmm.
they couldn't like just yank it out, so they had to like more or less hammer it out of my mouth.
Ooh,
And I was
no.
awake for that whole thing.
See,
And
okay, when it comes to normal surgeries, like, when they put you under, like, I'm okay with that, but anything that comes to dental work, I still get a heebie-jeebies. So, like, I'm just remembering all the drills and all the, it's just so uncomfortable, and you're awake for most of the time. So, I mean, when it comes to dental stuff, ugh, no thank you.
it's
So,
unnerving.
yeah, it really is, especially when, you and I have gone through so much. Like, can you imagine how many of those, like, what are they called, casts we had to do? Oh my god, I probably 100.
Yeah. Oh, I have.
Crazy.
Oh, yeah. No, I say no more. I understand. Um. So I guess we're coming kind of close to the end here. I don't want to take up too much of your day. Um. Let's. I'll give you the opportunity to talk a little bit more about what you do and how people can find your work, how they can work with you, and I'll give you a chance to talk about that a little bit.
Sure, thanks for the plug. Um, so, like I said before, I do a lot of creative strategy for a lot of small businesses, just as my own sort of freelance thing. I also do a lot of branding and logo work for a lot of businesses. Um, so what that means is just trying to really getting to the root of what your message is, what your values are, and how to apply that across the board in all the collateral that you put out, and even especially with social media. How do you want to represent yourself out on the internet? Because I think now it's more important than ever that people look at a company and they're like, I know what you stand for. So that is something that I do. I also do social media strategy. But I also, on the other side of things, do mentor and speak for people. So I go, well, before COVID, I would go to high schools and speak to students going to college. And I would also go to college and speak to students that are about to graduate and hit that market, um, looking for a job. And I have like a couple of students that I take on from time to time that I just kind of have Zoom calls like this one. Um, Not really therapy in a way, but just helping them orient themselves professionally and how to get over those self doubts. And like I said, turn those into things that are productive, and taking things day by day. Because I know right now, especially for a lot of people that are out of work or looking for jobs, it's really overwhelming, especially with everything in the news as well. So really knowing how to wrangle that into really digestible goals and tasks, and doing something that not only helps you professionally, but helps yourself internally, and just make yourself feel better all over. So, yeah, so you can find me on Brand Nhu. My name is Nhu, NHU.com. So you can find all my work there or contact me through my site. So thank you.
Awesome. And let me just say, when you talked about speaking at colleges and high schools,
Mm-hmm.
that's like a dream of mine. Like that's something I totally want to do. And it's one of the
Yeah.
reasons that I started doing this podcast is because I want to put myself in a position to do stuff like that. So when you said that you've been doing that, I'm like, oh, that's the thing. That's what I want to do. So
Yeah, I said
I
don't wait for it. Just go for it. Like I like we talked about it already. Go after it. Don't wait for people to come to you. I like reached out to the community or the career services departments, um, and I've stayed in touch with a couple of the teachers at high schools. So I just say, hey, I have a story that I want to share. I think your students might want to hear it. And worst thing they can say is no. So
Fair enough.
yeah.
Well, I guess when you start reading about the, reasons that you can, make money off of being a podcaster, reasons to do it or why, and it's just like that could help leverage that dream a little bit. So yeah, just you know, it's good for me to hear stories like yours because I'm like, oh, okay, she's just going and doing it. Why can't
Mhm.
I do that? I can do that.
Yeah, for
So
sure.
look, I could probably go all day on this, but you know, I guess we gotta move on with our day. One quick thing I want to throw out there: when I looked at your website, I did notice your one playlist for news karaoke faves.
Yeah.
So you do go out there and do karaoke, huh?
Oh yeah, I am a serious karaoke person.
Now,
So
do you have this mule karaoke app?
I used to. I don't do it as much anymore just because you need to like I'm also a perfectionist, so I'm like, oh, I missed that note. I'm gonna do it all over again. So it got to the point where I'm like, all right, I'm not even posting anything because I think it's not good enough. But I used to play with it a lot. It was a lot of fun.
Yeah, I since the pandemic started, I've really been on it. I can't say that I have like the greatest voice. There's some songs and vocalists that I can really do well, and there's others where I'm way over my head. So I guess
So
that
no Whitney Houston for you, huh?
yeah, yeah. So like for example, I see that you're doing some Whitney Houston songs, and
Hmm.
I mean, if that's something you're comfortable doing, that's amazing. I would be
I'm not
stupid.
comfortable, but I like to push myself.
I would be stupid enough to just be like, well, I love that song by whoever. I'm gonna
Mhm.
do it. And then I listen back, I'm like, oh my god,
You're like,
delete,
why?
delete, delete. So
Oh.
yeah, I just happened to catch that and wanted to ask about that. And
Yeah.
Nhu, you're really an inspiration, and
Yeah.
you've been very inspiring to me in this episode. And thank you for flagging me down and for wanting to be on this podcast.
Mhm.
And, you know, maybe someday we'll figure out another reason to do it again. And,
Yeah.
you know, I do have the live privilege on LinkedIn. So maybe
Oh,
we'll
you
do.
do.
I know it took me like, I applied and it took 2 or 3 months to get approved. It was
Oh, wow. I applied
pretty.
maybe a month ago, so we'll see.
Oh, well, good luck. And,
Thanks.
hopefully you get it, and maybe we can do a Mark My Words live sometime, and
Yeah.
we'll continue the
Yeah.
conversation. And
Thank you so much for having me. It's been a pleasure. I noticed you had bilateral tuft palates, and I knew you just had to have a story. I wanted to hear it. So thank you for sharing your story as well. And I just wanted to plug one more thing. It's not for myself, but it's for Smile Train, which is an organization that helps kids in third world countries that have cleft palate but can't afford it. If you go on Amazon.com, I think it's like smile.amazon.com. Um, all of the purchases you make, a small portion of that goes to Smile Train. So all you have to do is kind of switch over your default from Amazon to smile.amazon.com or something along those lines. And that really goes a long way. So if you're watching this, and Mark, if you're not already doing it, I highly suggest it because I know a lot of kids can really benefit from that.
yeah, I've heard of Smile Train. I should definitely get a little more involved with some of these things. I think
Yeah.
when I got to that point a few years ago where I started doing more entrepreneurial types of activities, that was something that I really wanted to get more involved with. So hopefully, as the pandemic hopefully gets better,
Mm-hmm.
and even before so, you know, maybe that's something I can look into more and do. And
Mm-hmm.
when you mentioned Smile Train, if you're on Instagram, there's a really great page called Cleft Proud, and
Okay.
they always are spotlighting stories from around the world, like almost on a daily basis of people just their own unique stories and what they've been through. And it's a really great thing to follow and a really great way for people to understand the obstacles and the challenges that people like you and I
Mm-hmm.
face every day growing up and just even as an adult. So
Yeah,
I wanted to throw that in there in addition to your thing.
for sure.
So we could ramble on all day, but I am going to say goodbye for now. This was Nhu Nguyen. I'm Mark Schmidt, and this was Mark My Words. I'll be back soon for another episode. Bye.
Bye.